live.
All right, today is July 8th, 2024. It's 7 p.m. and we are going to engage in our public hearing on the 2025 tax budget. We don't currently have any registered residents to speak on it, but I'm going to go ahead and call for quorum here. Roll call, please.
Ms. Brewer is absent. Mr. Fisher?
Here.
Dr. Fisher?
Here.
Ms. Primer is absent. Ms. Mail?
Here.
Mr. Michelson?
Here.
We do have a quorum.
We have a motion to excuse Ms. Kramer.
Motion to excuse Ms. Kramer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to excuse Ms. Brewer.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. So you know the agenda, it should be in front of you. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. As I said, we don't have any registered residents to speak on this. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our fiscal officer to give a little overview of what's going on.
So this is the annual tax budget public hearing. The purpose of this is to give the public a chance to give any feedback on the published tax budget for 2025. Again, this is a working document. This is not a set in stone document, but it does give us a general idea, much of it based on county feedback, of what receipts we do believe we're going to receive in terms of property taxes, income taxes, and other various funds that the village manages.
Good. In the interest of serving our public, I'm going to say that we will remain open for comments for at least another 15 minutes. For those watching, we have no one else in the room. We'll wait another 15 minutes to see if anybody shows up.
So I'll need a live chat so they can just text in.
Oh, that is
Yeah.
dangerous.
Long time viewer, first time caller.
From someone that calls in Cincy 360 on ESPN 1530, trust me, it's dangerous. I'm always giving them a hard time about Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
I'm a Browns fan from Cleveland, so I'm always calling, ragging on him.
You know,
Just made some enemies right now.
Everybody in Alabama just heard what you said.
I'll come next time. with the
You're
Browns.
in
trouble.
You're in trouble.
Mr. Fridnoff, would you, as our fiscal officer, would you give a description of where residents can find a copy of this tax budget online?
Absolutely. So if you go to the council packet, so that's going to be in the Gulf Manor oh.gov website, go to government, go to council minutes, go to 2024 council packets. You're going to scroll down to the 630 Finance Committee, which has the 2025 tax budget in it. That is a PDF of 5 pages.
Thank you, sir. My role is wet blanket. Any questions from council members of our fiscal officer concerning the tax budget? Mr. Prudenoff, would you give an overview for those who don't know, and a timeline through the year of this being the time when we do the tax budget? What is relevant to that moving forward and leading up to it?
So the tax budget is due on July 15th. That's this coming Monday. So the current meeting is in order to allow us to submit that tax budget to the county. There will be appropriations, which will have to be voted on in November. And that, again, will require a public hearing and then will be submitted to the county, pretty similar to this. The difference being that the tax budget does influence the local government fund that we receive from the county and from the state. I believe there is a portion that comes from both. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Solicitor. And that those numbers are determined by what we are presenting, what our expected receipts will be. I can also mention that was significantly reduced in recent years, used to account for a significant portion of the annual budget. My recollection was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I don't.
That's my recollection.
I know
I could be
it was much more. They cut it down to small.
I mean, it's not $100,000 now, that's for sure. Being that our budget is just over $2 million. I mean, that's not 10% of our budget. That's not even, 5% of our budget. So it's significant. We certainly, every penny that we receive from the state and from the government and from the county is significant. And it all adds up, but it used to be a lot more. And my understanding is that that is a subject of constant discussion between the local municipalities and the state.
Eric,
Yes, Mr. Fisher.
what is this capital outlay? 500, last year's 340.
Correct. So that capital outlay is to essentially allow room for grant monies to be spent. Most of that is not money that is village generated. So there is $415,000 in the land and land improvements line item, which is essentially for the purchase of 2 buildings and demolition of both of those buildings. That estimated cost is a $415,000 expenditure, which the corresponding revenue is in the, hold on one second, line item. That would be in the intergovernmental. You'll see $435,000 for the budget year. That's essentially an offset. So that's an inflation of our total expenditures. It's also an inflation of our total revenues. If we would not proceed with those projects, that money is officially appropriated, but we never received that money, so it would be incorrect to spend that money. But that is money that Mr. Hirth has indicated to me is available from the county, and therefore it was put into this budget. Another piece of that pie, which is a lot smaller, but no less significant, are the HVAC stage 2 and the upgrades to the mezzanine level for the police department. All of those are built into that. Those are smaller line items that all of them together with the HVAC are not half of one item in the land and land improvements line item. But all of them together is that 530, what I said, 535. No, I'm sorry, 430. So that was my apologies, 500, 183. Again, those are the major projects that when we talk about appropriations, those are going to be the major items. If there are other grant funds that people are aware of and want us to take advantage of, that would be where we would likely put it. That's where that's an important line item to be paying attention to. Good question, Mr. Fisher.
Anybody else have questions for our fiscal officer? So Pranav, would you give an overview of the mechanisms available to council for changing what we're planning on spending money on as we move through a given year?
I think we're sitting in that mechanism. In this room is where those decisions are made. I mean, unfortunately, at this point, most of those decisions are kind of baked into the cake. When it comes to I hesitate to say upgrade. When it comes to maintaining the HVAC system in this very old building, it's highly expensive. So a lot of that money gets kind of stuck in one line item. But the mechanisms which I would look into would be reaching out to county and state officials to seek grants. It's something that I'm doing currently. I'm actually in conversations with public officials in different parts of the state to acquire security grants, which can update our infrastructure in the village. But again, anything that goes into the expenditures line item has to have a source in the revenues line item. And we can't make changes in the expenditures without making that change in the revenues unless we're planning on dipping into the reserve, which, although that is a discussion, which is a constant discussion, I think is generally looked at as the accessibility for funds in the meantime until it gets reimbursed, rather than let's just spend that money for whatever purpose. So,
I do have one question.
yes.
In our general fund, over the past number of years, we've been spending into our general fund, our unencumbered, undesignated amounts. Usually in the amounts of a couple $1,000s here and there. It looks like in the 2025 budget, it's going to be by almost $70,000 that
Yes.
we're dipping into it. Could you highlight where the majority of that money is going towards?
So the majority of that money is going into the capital outlay line item that Mr. Fisher indicated, and that's an infrastructure cost, which it's part of operating this building. It's not something that we have ever historically put money aside every year and built up that fund. So, I mean, that's kind of where the reserve comes in, is on bigger items like that. I will indicate, and I think it's something that's important to point out, is that in the 2023 fiscal year, the actual tax receipts exceeded $1.1 million. In 2024, the estimate has always been more conservative than the actual, so you'll notice it's at 925. Do I think we're going to collect less in 24 than in 23? We're still trending ahead. I think the last finance report that I published was 5% ahead. So even if we were 5% ahead, that's still $50,000, really $55,000 on top of last year's. So that would put us at $1,150,000. I gave another, I believe, conservative estimate in 2025 is $1,050,000. That 100,000 will likely compensate for the expected expenditure in the capital outlay. However, I don't like to plan for it to cover. I like us to plan that, look, we're already assuming that we're going to be dipping in the reserve. And then in the end of the day, just like from 22 to 23, we only dipped in $5,000. My hope is that by the end of 24, that from 23 to 24, we didn't dip into the reserve, or it was minimal. And the same thing from 24 to 25.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for our fiscal officer?
Trying to something he doesn't have. So we has some good answers.
Again, for those who aren't in the know, would you give an explanation of what periodic adjustments to appropriations, what those are for, what that mechanism looks like?
So that's what we call an amended appropriation certificate. That's when we amend appropriations. We bring it to I bring to council with the solicitor a document which says these are the updated appropriations. And in the changes, generally speaking, those have been pretty minor changes. Last year, I remember one of the significant ones was the necessity to increase appropriations because of, that was this year, was there was a significant donation that came in for the K-9 program. So we're not allowed to spend any money that we didn't already appropriate. And if we were planning for the $4,500 total donation, because it's from multiple sources, if we were planning on that, then we would have accounted for that in our tax budget as well as in our appropriations. That would have been passed. However, because that had not been received in 2023, when I was building the appropriations for 24, I had no reason to assume that money was coming. Lo and behold, January of 2024, we did receive that $4,500. So that's where I came back to council and said, if you'd like to spend this money, which is certainly money well spent, we would need to change those appropriations. So that's where I will request Mr. Butler to compose the amended appropriation, appropriation amendment certificate, which is then presented to council.
which I'm happy to do.
Any other questions of our fiscal officer? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your service, everyone.
Are we off the record?
Not yet, I'm sorry. Doing the minutes at the same time. Here we go.